She hadn't been on stage for 10 years and vowed to never pick up a violin again. But one humiliating audition was the beginning of her most honest performance. They laughed until they heard pain, love, and strength all in one melody. And when the last note faded, no one in the audience was the same. Don't forget to subscribe and like so you don't miss new stories. Florence Bell's house stood in a quiet part of Sandersville, among similarly neat houses with slanted mailboxes and old cherry trees. It was 2 stories high, with a peeling porch where empty flower pots swayed and a forgotten bell rang in the wind. In the past, many years ago, the house rang differently, with the sounds of violin and piano, laughter, duets, hot tea for two. Now there was silence here, not oppressive, not angry, just old, like a grandmother's blanket that you keep even if you no longer cover yourself with it. Florence woke up as always before dawn. She felt for her glasses, put on a warm cardigan, and went down to the kitchen. The kettle no longer whistled with steam. It had long been electric, but the habit of listening to the silence before turning on anything remained. She put the tea down, took out 2 glasses. She stopped for a second, looked at the second one, sighed and put it away. Still, in the corner of the living room, under the bedspread, stood an old violin. Black case, peeling handles, worn leatherette. Florence passed by every day, and every day she did not touch it. She told herself that her fingers were no longer the same, her hearing was dull, her memory was fading. But in reality, everything was different. Music is like breathing. If one day it gets stuck in your throat, it is scary to breathe again. It was a routine day, a bit of gardening, a couple of phone calls, one visit. As always, Meg Wilson blew into the house like a spring breeze, bringing with her the scent of perfume, apple pie, and news. Florence, guess who was invited to conduct our new city orchestra? Someone from Georgia again? Better, from Atlanta itself. Anton Jennings, can you imagine? Florence raised her eyebrows. The name sounds familiar. Tough, I think. Strict, yes, but the orchestra will sound like a big one. They announced a recruitment. Open audition for everyone. All? Everyone. Even for people like you and me. Florence chuckled and took a cup of cold tea. I'm 73, Meg. I have arthritis, and your we is you and your dog. I'm serious, Meg sat down opposite him, leaning her elbows. You remember how you play? Everyone does. You taught half the kids in this neighborhood. You should at least try. I've tried that before, Meg. Once. Now. No stage, no audience, and no need. It's not true. It is necessary. You just don't admit it. Florence turned to the window. He died to my music. I don't want to play for the void anymore. You don't play for nothing. You play for yourself. And maybe for him. He'd be proud. There was silence. Long, gentle. Then Meg stood up, went to the case, and removed the cover. The violin was still in shape, though it had lost its shine. Sign up. Just show up. If it doesn't work out, so be it. But if you don't go, you'll regret it. And you know it. Florence did not answer. Meg left, leaving behind the smell of pie and a disturbing trail of words. Florence sat in her chair for a long time that evening, her head bowed. The branches rustled outside the window. Everything inside her was arguing. Her fingers remembered, but her heart was afraid. She stood up, walked over to the violin, and felt the clasp. Click. The lid opened. The smell of wood, resin, time. Florence picked up the instrument. It was warm, as if it was waiting. She drew the bow across the strings. A soft, trembling sound cut through the room. It was not pure, but it was alive. Tears came to my eyes. Hello, she whispered. Did you miss me? And in the corner behind the photo of her husband, it was as if a glare of sunlight had flared up. Or maybe it was a tear of light. The morning began with a slight tremor in her fingers and the smell of polished wood. Florence sat on the edge of her bed, looking at her violin lying on a chair by the window. The night had been restless. Music lulled her to sleep, then woke her with memories it had not called. Her dreams were full of scenes, spotlights, and one glance. Him, her husband, from behind the scenes. She had not played for a decade, but her fingers, as if alive, sought the strings even in her sleep. The day was cool. The last leaves hung on the trees in the park near the City Philharmonic like yellowed letters. Florence walked slowly toward the building, holding the case in both hands, as if it were not an instrument but a vessel with something fragile. The steps of the Philharmonic were higher than she remembered. Her heart was beating faster than she would have liked. "Good morning. Are you here for the audition?" The receptionist smiled the way children smile when they put on their mother's heels. "Yes. Florence Bell. Violin. Excellent. Come into the hall. You are 27th on the list. There is not much left." Florence walked down a long corridor, the walls decorated with posters from past seasons. Each portrait showed young, confident faces. Nowhere was hers. A group of young people were sitting on a bench near the entrance to the hall. Some were leafing through sheet music, some were playing around, some were joking. They looked at her with polite indifference. She sat down to one side, opened the case, and took out her violin. Her hands were shaking slightly. "Aren't you cold?" A skinny girl in a denim jacket asked quietly next to her. "There's always such a draft here." "It's all right," Florence replied. "I just haven't played the instrument in public for a long time." "Well, good luck to you. I hope we all get in." "Although," the girl shrugged, "he's strict. Very." The door swung open. "Number 27, please." Florence stood up. It seemed as if even the air froze. The hall was half dark, with dim lighting, like before the start of a performance. The stage was empty. There were 3 people in the hall. In the center was a tall man with sharp features in a dark turtleneck. Anton Jennings. "Please introduce yourself," he said without raising his head from the score. "Florence Bell. Violin. The work is Masson's Melody. Ready? You have 2 minutes." She lifted the violin, took a breath. The first note was trembling, like the voice of a sick person. The second was quieter. But in the third, as if from underground, a sound broke through. Warm, deep, carrying life. Her fingers remembered. Her left knee trembled, but she stood. The music flowed like a river. But in the middle of the phrase, a voice interrupted her. "Enough, thank you," she stopped. "Sorry, we don't have much time. Thank you. Next. I just started." He looked up. His gaze was cold, without pity. "Madam, you are about 30 years late. They are looking for fresh blood here, not nostalgia. Good luck." She stood. A second. 2. She wanted to answer, to scream, but her throat tightened. "Thank you for your opinion," was all she said, bowed and left. Young voices were making noise in the corridor. She passed by without hearing them. Only somewhere behind her, a quiet voice was heard. "I liked it." A girl of about 10 years old with pigtails ran up to her. "You played as if you were telling a fairy tale." Florence leaned over and looked into her eyes. "Thank you, dear. That's the best thing I could hear." She stepped outside. The air was colder than it had been that morning. The violin felt lighter in her hands. Not because her soul felt lighter, but because the burden had not been lifted from her. She simply realized that she could carry it. The weather on the day of the concert was warm, a rare gift of autumn. The town of Sandersville was slowly awakening, wrapping the streets in a haze and the aroma of roasted almonds from street vendors. The square at the Veterans' Home was decorated with bunting, handmade garlands, and a wooden stage covered with a carpet with ragged edges. Meg rushed between columns and boxes of equipment, shouting to the volunteers. "No, no, Joe, put the speaker cord in the other socket." Meg waved her hands. "And where are the flowers for the stage? Florence will be here soon." She looked around. The clock said 10 to 5. The concert was to begin at 5 sharp. The audience was already gathering. Grannies in colorful scarves, teenagers with cameras, men in caps, former military men with straight postures and tired eyes. The air vibrated with anticipation. Florence sat in a small dressing room backstage. The room was cold and smelled of old paint. Her best jacket, dark blue with a silver lily brooch, hung on a coat rack. She looked at her reflection in a dusty mirror. Her case was next to her. Her violin was already lying on her lap, covered with a kerchief. "Are you ready?" Meg peered cautiously through the door. 10 minutes left. More and more people are coming. And by the way, she hesitated. Anton Jennings is here. With a group of musicians, he sat in the 5th row. Florence looked up. He says he came to listen to what touched the children so much. His words. Well then, she straightened up. He'll listen. Meg came closer and carefully took her hand. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. Only to yourself. I've already proven everything, Meg. I just want to play. The first sounds of the concert were heard backstage. Someone was reading poetry. Someone was singing songs. The applause was sincere, but when they announced, "And now Florence Bell will play for you," the audience froze. Florence came out, slowly, calmly. The wind barely touched the hem of her jacket. The violin in her hand seemed an extension of her body. There was only a chair and a microphone on the stage. She didn't need an orchestra. She looked at the audience. Meg was in the front row. Next to her was the girl with the pigtails, the one from the Philharmonic. Further on were unfamiliar faces, and a little to the side, him, Jennings, his arms crossed with his usual arrogance. Florence sat up, inhaled. I last played this piece more than 10 years ago. Then next to me was the man I loved. Today I play for him, and for myself. She rested the violin on her shoulder. The bow trembled. The first note was almost silence, like a memory, not a sound. Then another, and another. The music unraveled like an old story told in a whisper. There was no technical brilliance, but there was pain, and warmth, and tenderness. People froze. Some wiped their eyes. Some closed them completely. The bow moved smoothly, like an artist's brush painting the last sunset on an abandoned canvas. It seemed as if even the trees in the square were listening. Florence finished. The last note hung in the air, and no one breathed. Then silence. And only then applause. Long, standing. Someone jumped up. Someone shouted, "Bravo!" Someone simply remained silent, not knowing how to express what they felt. Florence bowed. Her eyes were shining, but not from tears, from the light. When she returned backstage, he was already standing there. "Dr. Bell," Jennings said quietly, "I was wrong. I'm not a doctor, Mr. Jennings. I'm just a musician. A musician who reminded me why there is a stage at all. Is this a compliment?" "This is a confession." Florence nodded. "Then I accept it." He extended his hand, but she did not take it. Respect is not a gesture, it is actions. Show it, and then we will talk. She passed by, leaving behind the scent of resin, wood, and something else. Music, real music. The next morning, the city seemed to wake up different. The Sandersville Tribune came out with an unexpected photograph on the front page. A woman with a violin, sitting at the edge of the stage in the soft light of a spotlight. The caption was short, "When the heart sounds louder than the notes." Florence did not know this. She had woken up early, as always, made tea with mint, and sat by the window, where the morning sun was filtering through the curtains in thin gold. Ribbons. On the table lay the violin, open, as if it did not want to be locked up any longer. Everything was the same, and yet everything was different. The phone rang before 7. First Meg. "Have you read the newspaper?" "I don't subscribe to the Tribune." "Then come down. I'm standing on your porch with 2 copies and donuts." Florence opened the door. Meg was standing there with a paper in her hands, beaming as if it was her concert. "Have you seen this photo?" "This is a historic moment, Florence." "Sure enough. I thought you only exaggerated on holidays." "Today is a holiday." They sat on the veranda, where the cool of the night was still felt. Meg unfolded the newspaper with such trepidation as if she were leafing through a family album. "Look, you need to perform again. More than once. You did something no one expected. Not even Jennings. And you know what? He called me." Florence raised an eyebrow. "You?" "He asked if I could give you an invitation. To a music school. He offers you a position as a mentor for young musicians." He did. And it seems surprisingly sincerely. He said that you inspired him to remember why he was even standing behind the conductor's podium. Florence took her cup of tea. The silence between them was not awkward, but warm, like a blanket. And I don't even know, Meg. It sounds beautiful, honorable, but I'm not sure I want to go back to school. I've been hiding from this music for so many years, like from a mirror. And now that I've looked into it, I don't want to put on my old roles again." "Then don't wear it, make a new one. Not a teacher with grades, but someone who simply shares what's inside. You're not just playing, Florence. You're bringing things to life. In the afternoon, she received two more calls, from the local radio station and from the director of the Arts Center. In the evening, there was a knock on the door. The same girl with pigtails and a violin case in her hand stood on the threshold. Her mother was nearby. Sorry for not calling. Gracie really wanted to thank you. She can't stop talking about your performance. Florence smiled. Come in. I just happen to have some tea left. In the living room, the girl sat on the edge of a chair holding the case like a relic. Can you listen to me? I really want you to tell me how I'm doing. Of course, darling. Of course. Gracie unfolded the violin, tautened the bow, looked at Florence and began. Her fingers trembled. The sound was uncertain, but there was a hunger in it. Sincerity. The music came not from technical skill, but from something very fragile that she carried within herself. Florence didn't interrupt. She just watched. And when the girl finished, she said, You already know the main thing. You play to say. Everything else is a matter of time. Gracie's mother nodded her thanks. They left half an hour later, and Florence sat in silence. The room smelled of tea and resin. Through the dim window, she could see the first yellow leaves falling outside. The next morning, she called the school. It's Florence Bell. I agree, but not as a teacher, as a listener, and as someone who can sometimes answer questions if they are sincere. That's exactly what we're looking for, Jennings replied. Nothing forced, just music. She hung up, opened the window. Cold air rushed in like a breath before a play. Everything started all over again. But this time, according to her notes, the first snow in Sandersville always fell suddenly, as if someone in a celestial workshop had accidentally dropped a handful of frost. The morning was quiet, slow, with a few flakes swirling between the old lampposts and windowsills. Florence walked down the empty street, wrapped in a gray coat and a dark blue scarf. In her hands was a black case, familiar, almost light. She was heading for the new building of the Arts Center, the opening of which was an event in the city, and the invitation to play on it was unexpected but honorable. Meg was waiting for her at the entrance, jumping up and down from the cold and excitement. You're beautiful, really, and I won't let you worry. Everything will be as it should be. I'm not worried, Florence smiled softly. I'm just listening. What? Silence before music. It always tells what will happen next. The foyer of the center was filled with the aromas of pine wax and fresh paint. The hall was shining, high windows, wooden walls, burgundy velvet chairs. People were walking in slowly, with anticipation on their faces. Some were whispering at the entrance. Some were leafing through programs. Gracie and her mother were already sitting in the second row. Jennings was in the first, next to his colleagues from the Philharmonic. It was warm and almost empty backstage. Florence put the case on the table and slowly opened the lid. The violin gleamed with varnish, as if remembering each year that had passed. You're still with me, she whispered, running her finger along the fretboard. Today we're not going to play for the stage. For them. For everyone who's ever been afraid to be themselves. There was a light knock on the door. Can. It was Jennings. His appearance had changed. Before, closed, tense. Now, calm, almost warm. I just wanted to wish you good luck. Thank you. Although, luck is not so important to me. What is important is that the sound finds those who are ready to listen. He will find it. He already has. Anton, Florence looked at him carefully. I wanted to say, thank you for once telling me no. That was rude, I'm sorry. But it pushed me to the most honest yes. He nodded. The unspoken words hung between them, and that was enough. The presenter's announcement was soft. Today we will hear from a person whose name has become a symbol of strength, inspiration, and real music. Meet Florence Bell. The applause was not stormy, but warm, like palms around a fire. Florence came out, slowly, calmly. There was silence on the stage. People froze, catching her every step, every movement. I haven't played for a big stage for many years, but when I was asked if I wanted to again, I answered, if at least one person in the audience was ever afraid to be heard, I will play. She sat down. She brought the violin to her shoulder, and it began to sound. The piece was simple, not for brilliance, not for technique. It was a melody she had written herself when she lost her husband. No words, no title, just notes, just heart. The bow moved smoothly, unhurriedly, as if it was telling a story. About the house that smelled of cinnamon, about the hands that held her in her sleep, about the windows that reflected the sunset, about pain, about loss, about hope, and about the fact that in the end, only music remains. Some closed their eyes, some held their hands on their chests, some cried quietly. When the last note died away, Florence did not immediately open her eyes. She listened to the silence, her silence, and only then did she stand up, bow, and for the first time truly, smile. The audience stood up, standing, for a long time without words. Later in the foyer, children from the music school approached her. One boy held out a piece of paper. On it were crooked notes and the inscription, "My first piece. I wrote it after your performance." Florence took the sheet, bent down and said quietly, "Take care of it. It's your voice. Let it sound." "Will you teach us?" the girl asked. "No, but I will come. Listen, and if you like, sometimes play with you." It was already dark outside. The snow began to fall more densely, covering the roofs, the streets, the voices. Florence came out of the building, wrapping herself in a scarf. Meg stood on the porch, holding a thermos. "Hot chocolate, on occasion. Nachnam, you thought of everything." "Someone has to take care of the greats." They laughed. "You know," Meg said, "the whole town wants to hear from you again now. Maybe a county tour? Only if there is pie at every stop." "Agreed." Florence took a sip. The chocolate was sweet, with a hint of cinnamon. "Meg? Yes? I thought I had lost the music, but it turned out I was just silent. It was inside me all this time, quietly waiting, and now I am no longer silent." They stood under the snow among the lights, in a city that heard its music again, and perhaps understood that the most important thing is not the stage, not the recognition, not even the applause, and the fact that the heart still sounds, and someone nearby is listening.